I'd like to welcome Professor Marwala. Professor Marwala is an accomplished scholar with multidisciplinary research interests that includes the theory and application of AI to engineering, computer science, finance, social science, and medicine. He has an extensive track record in human capacity development and has published 15 books in AI. The professor is the Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of Johannesburg, UJ, and prior to this, he was the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Internationalization and Executive Dean of Engineering and the Built Environment, both at the University of Johannesburg. He was recently appointed as Deputy Chair of the Presidential Commission of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Professor, welcome.
Thank you. Sanbonan. Dumelan. Abusheni. Molweni. Dimadekwana. Thank you very much for coming to listen to me this evening. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge the presence of a number of people. Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu, the first black chartered accountant in South Africa. You can give him a round of applause. He was also a former vice chancellor of the University of Transkei. Of course, we also know him as an economic advisor to the former president of South Africa, Mr. Thabo Mbeki. And statistically, that is the period in which our economic growth grew the most. So you can give him another round of applause. I also would like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Khoza. I can't see him. Dr. Khoza also needs no introduction. Spent quite a great deal of time in the boardroom, but a man of great integrity, former Chancellor of the University of Limpopo. Please give him a round of applause. I would like to acknowledge the presence of the family of Lord Ndlovu, his son Monde, and the two daughters and the granddaughters. Please, let's give them a round of applause. I come from a village called Dutuni in Limpopo province. And the next village is called PPD. That is where Shirley comes from, by the way. So I used to walk to her. At that time, I thought it was your grandfather's shop to buy, I'm embarrassed about this, to buy benzene. I'm not going to talk about what we're doing with benzene. And I would like to welcome you all here. I think this is really an honor for me to be invited to deliver the Maduka Lord Ndlovu Memorial Lecture. And I would like to talk about ethical leadership in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. As I was reflecting about the enormous leadership role that Lord Ndlovu played both in public and private sectors, I was reminded of the statement from the first president of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah. He was addressing the students, and I quote, "Think, study hard, work with sustainable effort. As never before, we want thinkers. Thinkers of great thoughts. We want doers, doers of great deeds. Of what use is your education if you cannot help your country in her hour of need?" Close quote. This statement, more than anything else, characterizes Lord Ndlovu. Lord Ndlovu was a thinker of great thoughts. He studied hard. He worked hard. He was a doer of great deeds. Lot was born into poverty, but did not allow poverty to derail him. He was born into political exclusion, but found political, economic, and social relevance even in the darkest of our days. He had no access to leading centers of learning, but actually ended up at Harvard University. A great leader, indeed, he was. He was an ethical leader. Where are the Lord Ndlovus of today? As we enter this fourth industrial revolution era, when technology is increasingly becoming the most dominant force in production in industries, it is opportune for us to learn from Lord Ndlovu. To understand the fourth industrial revolution, we need to first understand the other three revolutions: the first, second, and the third industrial revolutions. If there is something that if all I say today you forget, you should not forget that there is the fourth industrial revolution because there is the first, second, and the third. So the first industrial revolution happened in England in the 17th century. England is actually an island, and it is geographically not connected to the rest of Europe. If you were to wander around in England, and I was a PhD student at the University of Cambridge more than 20 years ago, and interact with a local population, you shall be perplexed by how ordinary the English are. England is so ordinary that today you do not know whether the English want to be in Europe or they want to be out of it. But England was colonized. It was colonized by the Romans. The Romans used to call the English the barbarians. They used to call the Germans the barbarians. And its culture was completely wiped out. Sometimes when we think of Europe, we don't realize how much their culture was wiped off. What you see now in Europe was the replacement of a European culture by a Christian culture. And for those of you who do not know, Christianity was in the continent of Africa before it went to Europe. Its founder, Jesus Christ, was actually a political refugee in Egypt. You know the story. So the so-called English names are actually not English at all. They are Middle Eastern. John is completely from the Middle East. Peter, so is Sarah, so is Catherine. So all these were imposed on the English. At the time of the beginning of the first industrial revolution, the English were not even confident to teach in their own language. We know that just before the first industrial revolution, there was a scientific revolution. And one of the names was a scientist who actually studied at the University of Cambridge, Sir Isaac Newton. We forget that when he was writing his laws of motion, it was not in English. It was in Latin. And of course, Reformation came. And when Reformation came, started in Germany, and Europe, which was speaking, the academic speak was in Latin, decided to start teaching in their own languages. And one of the questions that were being asked at the time was, how are you going to teach science in such an underdeveloped language called English? And of course, we know what the English did. Every word that they did not have, they imported a Latin word. In fact, scientific words are so Latin that if you discover a new species today, you are almost obligated to give it a Latin name before you give it an English name. So, these colonized the English, who were colonized by the Roman Empire, also became colonizers. The Romans used to actually call the English, they used to make the English the slaves. In fact, there was a Roman emperor who wanted to invade England. And then the weather was not good. He says, but how can I go back to Rome, not having captured England? So he went to his soldiers and he got English-looking soldiers and he put them in chains so that when he walked into Rome, they will know that he has captured England, and of course, the rest is history. Lord Ndlovu, in his professional life, was actually preparing us to be influential people. He wanted us to move away from victimhood to become victors in all aspects of our lives, especially in the area of the economy. He wanted us to be strong so that we do not become victims of the modern day discrimination, economic exclusion, and global irrelevance. Now, why did the first industrial revolution happen in England? Not in China with a big population, nor in India also with a big population, or also in Africa. It was because the scientific revolution that gave us Newton, Watt, and Hooke happened in England, not in China, or Africa, or India. In the first industrial revolution, the world was introduced to a steam engine that powered factories and trains. During the first industrial revolution, we were not even spectators of this revolution. We did not even know that this revolution was taking place. In the spirit of Lord Ndlovu, now it is the time to prepare ourselves to become full participants in the fourth industrial revolution. During the first industrial revolution, a group of people called the Luddites were not happy. They were saying that this first industrial revolution is taking away our jobs. They organized themselves and they used to go into factories at night and destroy machines so that they can protect their jobs. But most of them were arrested, and some of them were hanged. And the first industrial revolution marched on. In June this year, there was a post on Facebook that said, and I quote, "So the VC of UJ is using the name of Tshilidzi Mashinini to promote his violent anti-black project of the fourth industrial revolution." I close. Now, I do not want to be accused of using the name of Lord Ndlovu to promote the violent anti-black fourth industrial revolution. When technology revolution is coming at you, you are either part of it or you shall be swept away into the dustbin of history and irrelevance. Lord Ndlovu would not have wanted us to become the Luddites of the fourth industrial revolution. He would have wanted us to participate fully in the fourth industrial revolution. He would have wanted us to identify business opportunities and to thrive in the fourth industrial revolution. The second industrial revolution happened mainly in the United States, with ideas developed in England by scientists Michael Faraday and James Clerk Maxwell. Faraday realized that if you have a magnet and you have something that conducts electricity, if you put them next to each other and you move the conductor, electricity is generated. I can see Shelley is saying, "I knew your family were full of witches." So asiutakati, this is science. To this day, the majority of electricity is generated by moving a giant conductor next to a magnet. So when you go to Eskom, you have coal and you have water, and the water is boiled. That is why you have boilers. And when it is boiled by the coal, then steam is generated, and that steam is used to move a large conductor next to a magnet, and voila, electricity is generated. Whether it is nuclear technology, now nuclear technology works with a material called radioactive material. They are normally large material, and because of the repulsive forces in the nucleus, they are forever unstable. So they are forever emitting energy. So a 1 kilogram of uranium can emit energy for the next 2,000 years. In fact, the discoverer of radioactive material, it was a Polish woman by the name Marie Curie. She is the only person to win 2 Nobel Prizes, one in chemistry, one in physics. She was so fascinated about this material because they were always glowing that she used to put them in her pocket. And of course, we know that radioactivity causes cancer, and she obviously died of that. So, the reverse of that is that when one puts a magnet next to a conductor and put electricity there, it moves. This is what is called an electric motor. So when you go to the airport and you see your bag moving coming to you, it is because it has an electric motor. And an electric motor is one of the unsung heroes of our time. Apparently, Queen Victoria used to like ice cream. And this was the time before an electric motor was discovered. So she will send people to the poles to go and get blocks of ice so that she can have her ice cream. Now we have refrigeration because we have an electric motor. The compressor of your fridge is basically an electric motor. The electric motor is the basis of the assembly line today. So when you go to South African breweries and you see goods and services moving, it is because of an electric motor. And because of electricity and an electric motor, we were able to produce goods on a massive scale. And this is what the second industrial revolution gave us. Now, of course, Maxwell theorized this concept of electrical forces and magnetic forces. And he came up with a theory called, it's a bombastic word, the electromagnetic theory. And of course, the electromagnetic theory was not consistent with what Newton was saying. And he took a Dutch mathematician called Lorentz to basically correct Newton so that it can be able to predict what Maxwell was saying in his theory. But he couldn't be able to understand why. It was a young man, a German called Einstein, who looked at these two theories and what Lorentz did. And he came up with probably one of the most influential statements, that space and time are unified and they are bent. Isn't science beautiful? These things actually get me very excited. And that was actually what is called Einstein's theory of relativity. During this period, we were fighting in the Battle of Isandlwana. And in this, we won the battle and lost the war. Why did we win the battle and lose the war? We lost the war because we had not mastered scientific ways of organizing our society. In the spirit of Lord Ndlovu, now it is the time to master the art of scientifically organizing our society to increase economic production and transform our people. Today, we are winning too many battles and losing too many wars. The South African economy is set to grow by 0.9%. In real terms, this is less than our population growth. In effect, we are becoming poorer as a nation by the day. We seem to be losing the Eskom war for electricity security. We are battling with electricity, which is the technology of the second industrial revolution. Where are our modern day Lord Ndlovu to rescue us from economic implosion, rescue Eskom, and resolve our problems with the technology of the second industrial revolution? During the second industrial revolution, a group of people called the practical men tried to stop the second industrial revolution. But they failed, and the second industrial revolution marched on. The practical men of our times speaks more than they do. They shock more than they think. Lord Ndlovu knew that no one could stop the revolutionary march of history. He knew that what we ought to do was to work hard, to think hard, and to progress our people. The third industrial revolution came about by the invention of something called semiconductors. These are materials that conduct electricity under certain conditions. Because they conduct electricity under certain conditions, you can be able to use them as efficient switches. When you switch something on and off, it means you can code ones and zeros. And the concept of communicating a message using ones and zeros did not come up with a computer. Professor Wiseman Kutlu and Dr. Koza will know this because I know they were there. That there used to be something called a telegraph. And a telegraph is something which used to communicate by switching on and off. So you will have somebody who will take your message, turn them into ones and zeros. There will be cards that show you how many ones and zeros, and you will press a switch on and off depending on how many ones and zeros. And somebody on the other side will decode that, and they will translate it into words. When I was an undergraduate student in North America in 1992, I received a telegram. It must be one of the last telegrams to be sent. And this telegram had a very simple message. Chianeo is dead. Stop. Surely you will know, you cannot call an old person Chianeo. You will say, wo Chianeo, isn't it? So why didn't they do that? It was because they used to count every word, and every word was priced. So you wanted the message to be as short as possible. And because you needed to know where the message ends, they used to have a code. Because it's just ones and zeros, you need to know where your message ends. So there will always be a stop at the end, you know. So what happened with semiconductors was that those ones and zeros were digitized. And the people who did this were Americans. One of them was a guy called Shockley. So he discovered this thing called transistors. So he wanted to make them work as a business. So they went to a peach farm in California that today we call Silicon Valley. It was a peach farm. So he arrived there with a group of 8 bright graduates, and then he wanted to commercialize this, to manufacture them in big scale. Of course, they realized that for every 100 they make, only 2 work. That was before the discovery of what is called a clean room. So if you go to a semiconductor company, it's a clean room. People cover themselves completely because any introduction of dust will make that transistor not work. Then while he was at the middle of commercializing this, a tragedy happened to him. He won a Nobel Prize for physics. So after he won a Nobel Prize, these young people will come to him and say, yeah, no, we can do it like this. He will show them his medal and say, what do you think you know? I have a Nobel Prize. They walked away. 3 of them went and founded a company called Intel, and Intel still dominates the semiconductor industry up to today. Your computer uses an Intel chip. To this day in Africa, we do not have a semiconductor company. Not in South Africa, not in Egypt, not in Kenya. We do not have a semiconductor company. And because of this, we do not have a homegrown computer company, nor a cell phone company that actually make these devices from the primary goods. So as we think about the 4th Industrial Revolution, let us not forget that we are still spectators and objects of the 4th Industrial Revolution. Let us think about how we shall develop the electronic industry in the continent of Africa. In the spirit of Lord Ndlovu, now it is the time to transform the landscape of our industrial base to grow our economy as well as decrease poverty, unemployment, and inequality. We were distant objects of the 1st, 2nd, and the 3rd Industrial Revolution, not subjects of these revolutions. We should become subjects rather than objects of the 4th Industrial Revolution. If we ignore the 4th Industrial Revolution, we shall become economic slaves. It is imperative that we become equal participants in the 4th Industrial Revolution. The colonization of our continent by the Europeans was because we were objects in all this industrial revolution. Now, what is this thing called the 4th Industrial Revolution? The 4th Industrial Revolution is a confluence, and I have a presentation also, you can also look at that. It is the confluence of technologies in the cyberspace. I'm not going to use digital, the physical space and the biological space. The cyber includes digital. The reason why I am not using the word digital is because we are now building computers that can communicate by using more than just ones and zeros. They are called quantum computers. The physical, very, very important. One of the limiting factors of computational power is the ability of a chip to handle heat. That is why after you just open your computer for 10 minutes, it is very, very hot. That is despite the fact that you have many fans inside that are trying to cool it down. For those of you who have seen data centers, you will know that it is all about refrigeration. Now, if you could be able to find material that can sustain heat, then it means you can build smaller and smaller integrated circuits, and therefore you can be able to build much more powerful devices without needing huge spaces. So development in the physical domain is very important. You also have development in the biological domains. Now, for the first time, there is a possibility that human beings with money can be able to buy intelligence. I used to be a student at a college called St. John's College at the University of Cambridge. And next to it, there is a college called Trinity College. University of Cambridge is basically 33 colleges that are combined and called University of Cambridge. And in this college of Trinity, they had quite famous students. One of them was Newton, obviously, 300 years ago. But not too long ago, they had another student called Prince Charles. He left he left Trinity College without a degree, simply because you cannot buy intelligence. So now in the fourth industrial revolution, we have things called gene editing. And the Chinese have actually just edited the DNA of twins. And the idea was that they were edited so that they will be resistant to HIV. And now we know that the byproduct of that is that the twins actually have bigger memory than on an ordinary person. So this fourth industrial revolution is combining these technologies. And the main driver of the fourth industrial revolution is a technology called artificial intelligence. I did a PhD in artificial intelligence more than 20 years ago. So when I came back, I went to a party. I think it was a party to celebrate the return of Mark Shuttleworth from space. And I met Mr. Derek Hanekom. You wouldn't refute this, no. And then I say to him, he says, so what did you do your PhD on? I say, on artificial intelligence. So he sort of paused and said, but why didn't you do it on real intelligence? So artificial intelligence is a technology where we build machines that are intelligent. At first, our intention was to build them to be as intelligent as human beings. But of course, now we can build machines that are more intelligent than human beings. The chess champion is not a human being, it's Deep Blue. The Chinese chess called Go, the champion is a computer program that was built by Google called AlphaGo. What it basically means, it means a machine can play something as cognitively demanding as chess or AlphaGo. So, there are many types of artificial intelligence. One of them is called computational intelligence. So computational intelligence, for those of you who have interacted with ants, you will see that sometimes they form a straight line, isn't it? That is the shortest distance from their nest to their food source. Of course, we know from that we have something called ant colony optimization, which is what is used in our electronic maps to find shortest distances from one point to another. So this is what is called computational intelligence. You look at nature, the intelligence of nature, and you build algorithms that are able to do that. Then you have something called soft computing. This is the type of artificial intelligence that does not require much data. Then you have the dominant one, which is called machine learning. That is the use of data and statistics to build intelligent machines. And when these machine learning algorithms are big, we call that deep learning. By the way, if you want to know more about this, please go and buy my book. It is a good book in the subject. It is on Amazon. Now, this is a car from an institution in Korea. The institution is called KAIST. This car was being driven by a robot. The chief of my village, Shelley, is now a woman, Woli Gege. So when I arrive there, I need to kneel to show my dues. If I take this robot, my chief will not be disrespected. It will kneel. It is able to open doors. And not too long ago in Johannesburg, we had 3 firefighters, one of them from my village, who died. Now, don't you think it would be nice to send machines to such dangerous activities? So, this robot can learn using artificial intelligence. It can sense its environment with cameras that are enacted on its body. It can react, it can drive, it can walk, it can even kneel. Because it can do all these things, it is almost human. Because it is almost human, it is artificially intelligent. But do you think it can fall in love? It will not fall in love because it does not have something that human beings have, which is called consciousness. Do you think COSATU can recruit it? Do you think it can respond to the call, to paraphrase Karl Marx, robots of the world unite, you have nothing to lose but your chains? Because of this, companies are actually very eager to put this artificial intelligence into production. One of the areas that is being disrupted quite a lot is the area of finance and economics. Now, when you go to the bank, they do something called credit scoring. And this credit score is used to decide whether you're going to get a loan and what interest rates you are going to receive such a loan. Now, what we are seeing is that that task is being done by artificial intelligent machines. And it does not only look at what you have on paper, especially if you have an African name. Because if your name is John Smith, there are too many John Smith in the world. But if your name is Professor Wiseman Nkutlu, you are probably the only one. And therefore, it can be able to go to the internet and get additional information to use in the credit scoring. So this is really what is happening. And by the way, you can go and buy my 2 books on this front on Amazon. It is changing the area of political science. Sometimes back, we wanted to find out, this is more than 10 years back, we wanted to find out whether we could build an artificial intelligence machine that will be able to predict whether 2 countries will go to war or not. We train political scientists to be able to do this thing. Could we train a machine to be able to do this thing? By the way, predicting whether 2 countries are going to go to war is not as difficult as you think. Do you think Eswatini and Switzerland will ever go to war? I'm not going to ask why, but you can see. So we did this work, and I wrote a book on it with Monica Lagazio. And the Chinese military actually took this book and translated it into Mandarin. So I was actually quite interested to know how are they going to translate my name. So this is how it is written. So the first character there, Ma, it is a horse. That picture that you see is a horse. The second one is Wa, is the gut of a roof. You can see something that looks like a roof and something that is collecting water. And the last 2 characters is La, is to pull. So I am a puller of horses from gutters of roofs. You see, when I arrived at university, my first engineering teacher was my grandmother, Buchianeo. So this is a picture of a bridge here in Johannesburg that collapsed. So what we wanted to find out was, can we be able to build an artificial intelligent machine that will be able to predict the collapse of bridges before they occur? It turns out that my grandmother knew the answer. My grandmother used to make clay pots. And I used to accompany her to the river to collect clay. It was the river next to a hospital called Tshilidzi. And Shelley, you know which hospital I'm talking about. There's a river there. We'll go there and collect clay. I know young people don't know that clay is found next to a river. You can't find clay in dry area, And of course, when I was doing engineering, I was told that whole process is called material selection. There are even softwares to do that. My grandmother could choose fairly good clay without the use of any software. Then she will come back and she will bake this clay. It's round, it has to be hollow, If the wall is too thick, then you will need much more wood to cook. If it is too thin, it's not going to last. So there's a bit of optimization there. We have an artificial intelligence optimization routine called genetic algorithm. My grandmother did not know what it is, but she knew how to optimize. Now after that, she will put the clay pot in the sun, and then she will take it to the furnace. Because she knew if she cooks with a pot that has not been baked, it is going to break. And then she will allow it to cool very, very slowly. That cooling process is called annealing. Annealing is such a powerful concept that there is an algorithm in artificial intelligence called simulated annealing. There is an Austrian scientist called Boltzmann who came up with a fancy equation called the Boltzmann equation to describe the annealing process. My grandmother knew about annealing. She did not know who Boltzmann was, let alone his fancy equation. After she is done cooling the pots, she will knock each one of them. If it rings for a long time, it's a good pot. If it rings for a short time, it's a bad pot. Of course, when I was studying engineering, they told me that if it rings for a long time, it is a lightly damped structure. If it rings for a short time, it is a damped structure. My grandmother did not know any of those things, but she knew how to select good pots. But as she was growing old, she was throwing away good pots because her hearing was deteriorating. So what we wanted to do here was, can we be able to use that framework to detect whether it is bridges and if the bridge is not in good condition, you can be able to evacuate people and save lives. People died here. And of course, we can be able to use something called accelerometers that you install in these things. It collects data, it goes to an artificial intelligence machine, and then it is able to tell you whether it is a good pot or not, or is a good bridge or not a good bridge. I did this work also with my student, Dr. Busisiwe Vilakazi, was my master's student. And she did this on monitoring of the power systems. She later on went to the University of Oxford to do a PhD, and she was now taking the same technology to patients who are in intensive ward, where you could just take all these measurements and you are able to determine whether the patient is critical or not. In fact, you can remove a nurse completely. The algorithm analyzes the data, and if the data is not looking very good, it calls the doctor to come and assist that particular individual. Today, Busisiwe is on the task team for ESCOM. So we hope that she's going to use this technology to save us. Now, this is another example of the work that we did. You have somebody with who loses their voice box because of cancer. And now you want to see whether you can be able to synthesize their voice. We designed this device, you put it in the mouth, and it measures the movement of your tongue. And from the movement of your tongue, it is able to generate data, and it is able to know what you were about to say. You can't say it because you no longer have a voice box, isn't it? And as a result, it is able to synthesize. I was reading on the newspapers that now they can synthesize voices in your own voice if they have your voice recorded. At Cambridge, there used to be a professor called Stephen Hawking. He used to speak with an American accent because the voice synthesizer was made in America. So we actually have a patent on this, a United States patent, which we ultimately sold to an American company because we do not have a viable venture capital market in South Africa. So this was an article on MIT Technology Lab where they were talking about our robot voice. By the way, we did this thing in 2008, a long time ago. So what is going on? Artificial intelligence is really changing our lives. It is solving problems that we cannot be able to solve. few years ago, me and my late student, Mashaba was your cousin. He was my student. He passed on last year. Very, very bright young man. Me and him designed a system that we wanted it to translate words automatically as you speak from Sesotho sa Leboa to English and vice versa. It was the time of Cuban doctors, so we were worried about that. And of course, the system worked very, very well. Then, later on, we wanted to extend it to be able to do the same, but for isiXhosa. Professor Nkulu, that was when our problem started, you know. Because every time there was a click, it thought it was noise. And then we said to ourselves, but why is this the case? It took us a while, but we had to go to linguists to explain to us. We found out that no, isiXhosa is not one language, it's two languages. Whenever isiXhosa is not, people are not clicking, I can even understand it. Izapa, idahafa. Mkazi, makazi. I mean, this is Venda and isiXhosa, isn't it? You know? Very, very similar. But when clicks come, we can't hear it. And the reason is because the clicks come from Khoisan, and the non-clicks come from a group of language, one of the most spoken group, in fact, the most spoken group of languages in the continent called Bantu languages. They are spoken from South Africa all the way to Kenya. You know, that's why when you go to Uganda, you can almost hear what they are saying, you know, because it's actually Bantu language. So it is a confluence. And the second thing is that isiXhosa is actually not a clicking language. We actually studied it. Only 5% of the language is clicks. So the clicks are not happening enough, often enough, for a machine to be able to learn. So the current technologies cannot be able to handle a hybrid language that are very different, because languages tend to be very similar when you come from one geographical area to another. Lord Ndlovu would have seen this as an opportunity to create black businesses. He would have thought about teaching young children in Eastern Cape how to code so that they can create machine translators that do not exclude their beautiful language. When you go to Google Translate and ask it to translate the expression, akwehlanga, lungehlanga, it thinks it means not a single nation. You can try it. The reason for that is because the guy in Silicon Valley who designed this thing actually does not know how to speak isiZulu. In fact, when you translate from English to isiZulu, it actually does much better than translating from isiZulu to English. Again, Lord Ndlovu would have seen a business opportunity for black businesses to resolve this issue. So to conquer the fourth industrial revolution requires the new Lord Ndlovus. What are the characteristics of the modern day Lord Ndlovu? This person should be very educated. Such a person should be an expert in the human, social, and technological sciences all at the same time. Such an individual should be open-minded and should understand that in the era of the fourth industrial revolution, critical thinking is more important than memorization of facts. Because Information is readily available on the internet. The skill that is needed in the fourth industrial revolution is how do you make sense of such information? The modern day Lord Ndlovu should realize that creativity is more important than copying other people's ideas. The individual should know that the age when countries economically rise by copying technologies from others is gone. The Lord Ndlovu of today should understand that coordinating with others using techniques such as crowdsourcing is more valuable than individual effort. The person should know that emotional intelligence is useful in the fourth industrial revolution era because teams are more diverse and creative than ever before. Such a person should be able to preempt the harmful and unintended consequences of technology, such as discrimination, because technologies are actually discriminating today. Not too long ago, the four of us went to Asia. I'm not going to name the name of a country because the last time I mentioned it, the ambassador came to my office to complain. So you arrive at this country, and there's nobody to help you. At least most of you should not be helped by an individual. It was four of us. It was Dr. Wangani Nolunga, who is the head of our of our Johannesburg Institute of Advanced Study. It was me, it was Peter Vale, and it was Oscar van Heerden. So you come there, you put the page of your passport that has your picture, and the camera is looking at you. So the artificial intelligence in the background actually verifies that the person on the picture is the same person I'm seeing now. So as the Vice Chancellor, I was the first one to go. I put the passport. The machine says, icon. I can't recognize this person. Then it prints a piece of paper, so you go to a long line where you're going to be held by a person. Then Oscar van Heerden arrives, does the same thing. It opens so fast. And it whizzes through, you know. Then comes Wangani Nolunga. Icon. Then comes Peter Vale. It opens so quickly. Now, why is this machine discriminating against people of African descent? The reason is very simple. This artificial intelligence requires money. Data is the new oil. Today, our people are doing the conspiracy that we are told was done in the past, that there was an exchange of mirrors for land. Now people are exchanging their entire data, personal data, for the Gmail account or the Facebook account or the Twitter account. Once you make that transaction, Twitter can be able, they know where you are now. They know where you have been. Not only do they just keep that information, they actually go and sell that information. That is why many of them are multi-billionaires. And this is done without the control of our government. So now, the reason why it was discriminating against us is because the data that is used to train that machine was not collected at Mahlawatini, where Wangani comes from, or Dutuni, where I come from, but in London, in Tokyo, in New York. If we do not master the fourth industrial revolution, even machines are going to discriminate against us. So for us to succeed in the fourth industrial revolution era, we should become excellent students who learn continuously. Lord Ndlovu, just like Isaac Asimov, knew that education is not something that you can finish. There's no such a thing that I have finished studying in the fourth industrial age. The acquisition of knowledge should be broad spanning the humanities and social sciences as well as science and technology. I need to say this because we don't do it very well in South Africa. I was an undergraduate student in North America. And when I arrived, and I had transferred from University of Cape Town, so I knew how an engineering curriculum looks like. When I arrived there, they say, you need to take 12 courses in human and social sciences. Doesn't matter that you are doing engineering. So, and they say 6 of them must be in one area. So I took 6 economic classes. I pride myself that my economic knowledge is better than many economists. Then I took 3 acting classes. So the reason you have not seen me in Mubango has nothing to do with my acting capability. They even gave me a play to act on. Ethel, if you got play, My Children, My Africa. My name was Tami Mbikwana, the character in that play. Then I decided to take a course called History of South Africa. I had to wait for a year because the class was always full. Are our mechanical engineering students in South Africa learning about the history of South Africa? So in this book, in this course, they gave us 2 books that were prescribed. One of them was a book called History of South Africa. It was written by somebody called Martin Legasik. Martin Legasik was suspended from the ANC in 1978 for his ultra-leftist tendencies and was expelled from the ANC in 1985 for his Trotskyite tendencies. He came back to South Africa and founded an organization called Abahlali Basemjondolo. He wrote a very good book, but the book will talk about everything, the frontier wars, the Anglo-Zulu wars, and so on and so forth. Said, you are learning these things at the surface. You need to read, we're going to prescribe another book that will give an event. So they gave us a book called The Dead Shall Arise. How many of you have read the book called The Dead Shall Arise? Of course, the professor would have read the book. That's why he's a professor. And I'm sure Dr. Koza also has read the book. So The Dead Shall Arise is a book about a young lady called Nonyawusa. And of course, if you read that book, you realize that it was a strategy to end the frontier wars. Because the frontier wars were going on for 100 years. And the people of Eastern Cape could just not be defeated. And what did they do? They used superstition to defeat our people. Now it is the time to start using scientific thinking to make decisions rather than superstition. The modern day Lord Ndlovu should have a global mindset instead of narrow nationalism. Lord Ndlovu's father was actually from Zimbabwe. How many of you knew that? Only 2. So I have informed you, many of you. And of course, given that, he would have realized that the economic fortunes of South Africa are firmly tied to the fortunes of the rest of the African continent. South Africa cannot afford to leave the rest of the African continent behind. There used to be a Japanese educator. On the 100th yuan, that is the picture they have. It was a guy called Fukuzawa. Fukuzawa was an educator. He formed a university called Keio University in a city called Yokohama. But Fukuzawa wrote quite a sad article more than 150 years ago. The title of that article was, "Goodbye Asia, we are leaving you behind." I don't think South Africa can afford to say, "Goodbye the rest of Africa, We are leaving you behind because our fortunes are tied. Perhaps Japan could afford that because Japan is not connected to Asia. Japan is actually an island at the eastern part of Asia. So they probably can afford to develop on their own. We cannot afford that. The modern day Lord Ndlovu must be innovative. When the modern Lord Ndlovu realizes that Google Maps cannot pronounce our street names well, he will go and form a company that will be able to pronounce our street names well. This Lord Ndlovu should understand that research leads to innovation, which leads to intellectual property, which leads to products. We can achieve all these attributes by demanding good education, which is precisely what Lord Ndlovu fought for throughout his life. In conclusion, Lord Ndlovu lived by these principles that we should emulate: ethical leadership, learning and continuously learning, thinking and thinking broadly, being connected to your community and understanding your community's problems with a mindset of resolving those problems, transformation of people, spaces, minds, and the economy, and inclusion, inclusive growth, and making sure that we all collectively succeed. Thank you very much. Ngiyabonga. Enkosi.
Thank you very much.